Hello, everybody. Perfect. So glad to have everybody here. I can't see you physically, but I can see that there are about 21 people on our broadcast. And we just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for being on time. And we'll get right into an introduction of our panelists as well as Black and Astro Week and what it means. And so welcome to Black and Astro Week's Black Exploration event. Today we're discussing how to launch a career in aerospace, and we're hearing from top and leading professionals in the aerospace engineering field so that they can share about their journeys and how they got to where they are. If you're not familiar with Black and Astro Week, Black and Astro is an organization. It's student-led, and it's founded by an astrochemist named Ashley Walker. And her goal in creating this organization is to celebrate and amplify Black scientists and engineers within the space community. The space is designed to provide support, networking, and guidance. So with that said, I will roll right into introducing our lovely panelists, starting with Dr. Pittman. And so as I introduce each of you, if you would just kind of wave so they know who you are, even though I know your name's on the bottom. So Dr. Lionel Pittman is an aerospace engineer for the United States Air Force. Dr. Pittman's primary duties are subsystems and safety engineering strides for the Light Attack Aircraft Program Office and the Advanced Fighters Division of the Air Force. That's a mouthful. Prior to joining the Air Force, Dr. Pittman was an associate professor of physics and engineering studies in the College of Arts and Sciences at Chicago State University. Dr. Pittman's research interests at CSU included cooling flows in gas turbine engines, aerothermal simulations, high-energy laser target systems, and wind energy systems. Prior to joining CSU, Dr. Pittman was a research assistant for Notre Dame Turbomachinery Laboratory. He has presented papers and posters at regional, national, and international conferences and has received several awards and honors. Dr. Pittman is the eldest of 6 children and received a BS degree in mathematics from Morehouse College, a BSc in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan, and an MSAE, or Master in Aerospace Engineering, and PhD in aerospace and mechanical engineering from the University of Notre Dame. So he's quite decorated. He is also a member of the National Society of Black Physicists, the National Society of Black Engineers, and the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Welcome, Dr. Pittman. And thank you for being here. Perfect. I'll move right over to Cadence with the beautiful pink head wrap. I am loving your representing for the culture. So Cadence Payne is a 4th-year PhD candidate in the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics at MIT. She is a member of the Space Telecommunications, Astronomy, and Radiation Lab under Dr. Carrie Cahoy, where she specializes in technology and mission design for small spacecraft called CubeSats. I'm a big fan of those, so I can't wait to hear more about your research. Her current projects focus on spacecraft that observe the Earth's atmosphere, magnetosphere, and oceans. She has held several industry internship opportunities and plans to continue a career in aerospace after getting her PhD. Welcome, Cadence. Perfect. Moving on to Jean-Louis. Jean-Louis Suazo Betancourt earned a BS in aerospace engineering from the University of Maryland College Park in the spring of 2017 before joining HPEPL. HPEPL stands for the High Powered Electric Propulsion Lab. I'm literally a lab member. I don't know why I messed it up. But he's a graduate student at HPEPL, and he joined in the fall of 2017. He earned his master's in aerospace in 2019. His primary research interests include the development of laser-based diagnostic systems for fundamental plasma physics and performance investigations of electric propulsion devices. Thank you for being here, Jean-Louis. Now for our final finalist, but is by no means the last, Dr. Rhonda Lyons. Dr. Rhonda Lyons is the founder and CEO of NIRAD Incorporated, which is an innovative aerospace and defense engineering company, which specializes in offering customized, affordable engineering solutions for lower Earth orbit, geostationary orbit, and disruptive aerospace technologies. She's an Army aviation veteran and pilot. Lyons is experienced with a diverse breadth of aircraft platforms, both rotary and fixed, military and commercial. After spending a decade in the commercial aviation industry in operations management, leading multidisciplinary cross-functional teams associated with conducting experimental testing, instrumentation, modification, and certification on commercial model aircraft, throughout the product lifecycle, Lions transitioned to the space industry as serving both a NASA contractor and as vice president of an aerospace company directly involved in the engineering, design, and launch of multiple ISS payloads, small satellite systems, propulsion technologies, and the development of technologies in support of several NASA missions. Previously, Lyons held several executive positions with other companies such as Chief Technology Officer and Chief Quality Product Officer, particularly supporting the launch, growth, and merger and acquisition activities for women-owned businesses. That's really exciting. When not engaged in product development of new innovative space tech for the satellite and space market, Lyons spends her time supporting her other entrepreneurial business ventures. As a STEAM education consultant and advocate, Lyons is committed to supporting educators and learning throughout the academic pipeline. Lyons has been recognized numerous times throughout her career for her dedication to community and commitment to inspiring the next generation of scientists and engineers. She was most recently recognized by AIAA, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, for her engineering and design contributions and the support of the first small satellite launched by middle school students in the United States. And it was designed to yield valuable scientific contributions, one of many launches that she has on the horizon with educational institutions and customers across the country. She's internationally published, technical and business leadership consultant, and a sought-out TEDx inspirational speaker. Thank you so much for being here. That is quite the monologue, and I think we have, an incredibly star-studded panel, and I'm really excited that we were able to pull in expertise within military, within commercial space, grad students who have all types of different experiences, and now even entrepreneurial ventures by aerospace engineers. So thank you all for being here. I want to first just kind of set the stage for this panel. Our goal is not to talk at you. I would love for this to be as conversational as possible. We're just sharing about ourselves, hopefully inspiring those who look like us, because representation is so far and few between in our industry. But we are those guiding lights to the people who are coming after us. So first, I want to just start getting to know you. We've heard about your impressive backgrounds. We've heard all the technical and fancy titles, but who are you really? And so I'm just going to kick this off, picking somebody random. Cadence, if you don't mind telling me, who are you? And define this however you please.
Sure. First of all, your all's bios are wild. This is like such an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm Cadence Payne. Like Nia mentioned, I'm a fourth year PhD student, I guess about to be a fifth year PhD student at MIT in the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics. I am originally from Kentucky in a really like tiny baby town with one stoplight called Eminence. But then I moved and like grew up most of my life in a town called Shelbyville. And it's like 30 miles east of Louisville. So Kentucky kind of like looks like a hand, and we're like about right there, kind of like center north. So I grew up in Kentucky. I lived all of my life there. I went to undergrad at Morehead State University, which a lot of people assume is Morehouse, but they're definitely not the same. So I went to undergrad at Morehead and graduated in 2017, where I studied space science and minored in astrophysics. So I've dabbled in a bunch of different things, but I really like science, and I always tell people that I think that I'm a better scientist than I am an engineer. I've just studied space for a while now, and I do a lot of space things, but I'm also a person. So I am really involved with STEM outreach. So I do a lot of work working with women and URMs at MIT. I also do a lot of advocacy work here at the institution, both on a departmental and institutional level. And I do other things, like I like to bike outside and I like to sing, and I'm attempting not to murder my plants right now. So yeah, things are going well, and I guess that's who I am, kind of, sort of.
We got to kind of peek in behind the curtain of the scientist and engineer title. And that's what I'm really looking for to hear from everybody, just because the goal is to be as accessible and tangible among the people that we inspire to. So if I could jump over to Dr. Pittman, who are you?
All right. Well, as stated, I'm Dr. Lionel Pittman Jr. And who am I? And for all intents and purposes, I'm a kid from Chicago. That's who I am. I'm a product of my parents and my siblings, which I'm the eldest out of six. I'm a product of public school, so I'm a big advocate of public school. I also bounced around like many people who do this crazy path and drink the PhD Kool-Aid. I started my career in mathematics at Morehouse. There's a joint program called dual degree program, so that's how I got to Michigan to do my aerospace program. And then when it got time to graduate, 2008, job market wasn't looking too great, but I also felt that I wasn't ready to enter the workforce. I decided to go to the University of Notre Dame for my master's and PhD. I look at myself as the opposite. I'm more of an engineer. I've always kind of been the hands-on, the application type of person. I really enjoyed my time thinking, like all of us, are big on STEM outreach because that's how we got here. So all throughout my undergrad career, grad school, I was coaching Lego robotics. When I was a professor, coaching our STEM outreach at Chicago State. Unfortunately, I haven't found my outreach yet, but as soon as COVID is over, I'll be in it. I enjoy, spending time with my wife, working out, video games, and, just trying to figure out engineering solutions.
Very cool. Thank you for highlighting some of those different hobbies. I'm sure you've got that in common with a couple of our attendees. I'm gonna jump over to Dr. Lyons. Who are you?
Okay, so first and foremost, I'm happy to be here today. So thank you so much for the invitation. And it's fantastic to speak to everyone. So who am I? So I'm Rhonda Lyons. I am I'm an average, down-to-earth human being, is what I like to say. I pretty much grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. That's my hometown. And from that point, I've lived probably, oh goodness, all over the place. 4 days after I graduated from high school, I actually left home and went to the United States Army, and I pretty much have not been back home per se since. That's where I started my career, and from there I just pretty much had the dream to fly. And so that dream took me all around the world, took me to, throughout military aviation, it took me into commercial aviation, and then also within academia. Everywhere that I was stationed at, I always went to school. So, over the years and with time, I continuously, would start working, on this degree, and I would build up until, I finally accomplished some of the things that I wanted to. And I've spent quite a bit of time in the corporate world as well, and always continued to go to school. And so pretty much, if I can sum it all up really quickly, again, human, mom, mentor, friend, just a down-to-earth person that absolutely is passionate about space, passionate about aviation, and I'm completely passionate and dedicated to our next generation that dreams to do whatever it is that they want to do in any industry.
Absolutely love that. And I can back that up with evidence. Dr. Lyons is actually one of my most beloved mentors. She definitely puts action behind her words when it comes to supporting the next generation. Her son is also another STEM superstar and my adopted little brother. So he's one of my favorite people. So who are you?
Kind of cut out there, sorry. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Kind of choppy. Okay, thank you. So thank you for the invitation to be here, and thank you for the introduction. My name is Jean Luis Suazo Betancur. I would say I am an immigrant. I'm an Afro-Latino. I was born in the Dominican Republic. Lived a couple places growing up, mostly between Massachusetts and right outside of DC, maybe 5 miles outside of DC in Silver Spring, Maryland. Came up in public schools, from Head Start all the way through high school. Bounced around a couple of universities and colleges, community colleges, before I ended up at the University of Maryland, where I got my BS. Then I made my way to Georgia Tech, kind of got plucked out of the pile there by Dr. Walker, and kind of been in his lap ever since, trying to do my best to pass on the blessings that have been passed on to me by some of my older mentors and other people in my life that have helped me get to where I am now. All while, of course, balancing this PhD thing and trying to be as involved as I can. I've been involved in a couple of mentorship programs, specifically Engages here at Georgia Tech, which is a high school program for underrepresented minority students. I've been involved to various degrees in a couple of the other outreach programs here at Georgia Tech. But if I could sum it up, like Dr. Lyons did, I would say I'm Afro-Latino, I'm an immigrant, I am a lifelong learner and a student, I am a son, and I am a brother. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry, I think Nye just had a little bit of like technical difficulties really quick. So hi, I'm Caprice. I think her internet cut out. So we will continue on next. Sorry for the delay. Give me 1 second. So ask them like what drew you to aerospace engineering, and just like as Naya did before, I'll just kind of pick someone at random from all you guys' lovely faces. I'm gonna go with Cadence. What drew you to aerospace engineering? If you could share that with us.
Sure. Yeah, this question is always interesting for me because I didn't have one of those like cute little origin stories, where you're like, oh, when I was a kid, I like went and saw a rocket launch, and then ever since then, like I was inspired to do space. Like I didn't have a cute story like that. But I did. I guess my first introduction was this program that I did that's native to Kentucky, I think, that's called Governor Scholars Program. And so it's basically like where you go between your junior and senior year of high school and you do like 5 weeks of college. So it's kind of like a college prep, like here's what college looks like and like what you can expect to do every day. So I went to this program, and at the time my career interests were all over the place. So I think at the time I actually wanted to be a photographer and have like my own photography business, which is another one of my hobbies, which I completely forgot to mention because hobbies are hard in grad school. But anyways, my stepdad was actually like, what if you, like did something else, like try a subject that's different, like astronomy. And so for some reason I like listened to him, and then like studied astronomy for the summer. And I like fell in love with it. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Just like staring at the stars and like being able to actually understand what they are as a career was like something that I never knew that you could actually do. So that was like my first intro. But then I went back to high school and I took a psych class, and I was like, I love psychology. Like this is a great way for me to help people. So I went to like when I first started undergrad, I actually studied psychology. But then like I found out that I didn't like it as much as I thought I did. I like failed a test and like didn't have any interest in studying harder, which was like definitely out of my character. So I was like, this is a sign, like I need to leave. And so luckily Morehead State actually had a space science program. And I was like, well, I tried this astronomy thing before and I like kind of liked it. So I just like frantically changed my major and like never left. So I think what keeps me in the field is the fact that like it's like I'm a problem solver. I've always been a problem solver. And the fact that like, to me, from my perspective, these problems that we like tackle in our field seem like the most interesting and like difficult problems that we can solve. And so the fact that I get to like do that for a career and like also geek out about the universe and how wild it is just like a dream come true for me. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what drew me here and what keeps me here every day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, my mom was actually the one that was like, you seem to be interested in this space stuff. Like, the staring at the moon is like kind of like interesting to hear the influences that kind of drive us like towards these fields and everything. We just like kind of keep on going with it after we found something that we truly love. I think is really great to hear. Who else? Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Cadence. I'm going to go with Dr. Pittman. Can you tell us what drew you to aerospace engineering and just the aerospace field in general?
Yeah. So I think when I was around 8 or so, I was in Tuskegee visiting family, and my dad kind of, father-son thing. We were going around to place. So we actually went and visited the University of Tuskegee, and they told me about the aerospace engineering program. That was the kind of the first time I heard about aerospace engineering. But what got me hooked was, for some reason, we were in the airfield and my dad got us into a plane. So we were, it's just a little crop dust. And we were flying up, and then the pilot just said, here, take the stick. Here I am, not really flying because, he's got this. But I got hooked after that. And my parents always they tried to introduce me to Black people who were sort of in the field that I kind of wanted to go. Similar, I kind of was interested in space, good at math and science, kind of, the standard origin story. But my dad was kind of sneaky with it. He would introduce me to scientists who happened to be members of our fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. So he introduced their stories, like Robert Lawrence, the first Black, astronaut. He was Tay Net went to space, but he was a test pilot. And one of kind of the mentors who I look up to, I wish I got a chance to meet, Ronald E. McNair. And I heard this story, I was in. So from the age of 10, I kind of said, I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. I mapped my path, that kind of singular path that I was just going to be an aerospace engineer. Didn't know what I was going to do as an aerospace engineer. I wanted to be.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm gonna look like Naya's back. I'm gonna let her take back over. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Caprice. Sorry, everybody.
All right, I think Naya, I think it might be a connecting issue. So we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna ask Dr. Lyons, what drew you to aerospace, engineering?
Okay, so what drew me? Well, I initially, had the desire to fly airplanes. That was the only thing that I was focused on. And I would say back when I was in the 11th, I believe I was in the 11th grade, somewhere around there, the U.S. Army came to our high school doing one of their recruiting tours. But on this particular tour, they brought a Black Hawk helicopter and they landed on our football field. So needless to say, from that opportunity and that experience, I was hooked. I stayed outside around that helicopter asking the pilots tons of questions. And when I remember one of the questions I asked was are there any other Army helicopter Black female pilots? I was very curious to kind of understand because I'd never seen an African-American female pilot before. And so, long story short, because I could go on and on about this one, but long story short, I continued to ask a bunch of questions, and one of the pilots said, hold on one second, let me go get something out of my bag. He went to his bag, and then he pulled out this big, thick manual. It was a huge, thick manual, and it was called the Fundamentals of Flight. It was an Army technical manual. And he told me, he said, if you really want to learn to fly, he said, you need to learn and memorize everything in this book. This book will help you get there. And so, of course, me as a high school student, that was all I needed to hear. And from there, I was like, okay, I'm going to fly. I read that book. I still have it somewhere. I carry it every now and then when I go out and speak to kids. But I tell you what, that is what really got me started. And then I also, keeping in mind, I came up kind of during a time, whereas when I went home and said, hey, I want to fly airplanes, my parents were like, you want to do what? Okay, you want to fly airplanes? We don't fly airplanes. But anyway, I was determined to find a way to get into aviation. And that's kind of how I ended up into aerospace in general. For the most part, is just by having someone that actually paid attention, to to me asking a bunch of questions and gave me a manual that I could actually sit down and read and learn and go from there. So from that point, I was like, okay, I want to go into aviation. I want to go into the Army. And then I, kind of went through some time with that. I ended up going into aviation maintenance initially, which was kind of a logical step for me because it's like, okay, before I learn how to fly something, I kind of need to understand how it works. So back then, I was one of the few out on the flight line. As a crew chief on Apache helicopters, I served, multiple military installations and over in Korea, and it was an interesting experience. And so that got me interested more so beyond just getting into maintenance, aviation, and flying. From that point, I wanted to understand how things really work on a detailed level. And so I'll fast forward a little bit. So eventually, again, as I mentioned before, I always went to school. So no matter where I was stationed at in the world, I was always taking college classes. And then from there, I ended up cycling out of the military, and I was I wanted to be an airline pilot. So I was building my time and doing a lot of flying and so forth. And 9/11 hit. And a lot of pilots were getting laid off and furloughed. So from that point, I said, you know what? I need to use the tools that I have in my toolbox, which is all the knowledge that I acquired, my journey, and I need to go and make some money. And so that led me into the corporate world where I took everything and all of the experiences, and I ended up at the Boeing company and spent quite a bit of time there. And I landed right smack dab in the middle of engineering, operations, maintenance, manufacturing, and testing and certifying airplanes all over the world. But it took all of those different experiences to kind of gel everything together. And then from there, from an academic standpoint, I was able to continue forward and really fine tune and focus more so on the areas within aerospace, aeronautics, and engineering, to really start doing what I wanted to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. What really resonated with me is like having that one person in your life, having that person in life that pushes you towards like going towards your goal or provides you with like the tool or thing like you didn't think you needed to like pursue something that like really meant a lot to you. So like I really resonate with that, and I see a lot of the panelists shaking their heads and now, so I assume that they do as well. So, kind of Jean-Louise, like what drew you to aerospace? We'll finish this question off with you.
So I was drawn to aerospace kind of a little bit later in my academic timeline. So like I mentioned, I'm an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, and I come from a pretty long line of mechanics, specifically generator mechanics. So we had just moved to Maryland. I just was entering 5th grade, and I got plucked out of the math class I was in because I guess, teachers knowing what they're doing, I guess they like pulled me out of the class I was in. They were like, hey, you're pretty good at math. You're good at this science thing. We're going to put you in this class and see what's up. So did well in that class, went on to middle school. My cousin was starting his mechanical engineering degree at the University of Michigan at the time. And my parents were talking about, hey, he's doing well at math, blah, blah. Talked to him about college. So he was like, hey, I'm doing this engineering thing. Heard you're good at this science and this math thing. Maybe you should look into it. We had just gotten actually our first computer for a few weeks before that. So I'm on the internet. I'm Googling what engineering is and what I got to do and the things I need to be good at. And I was like, okay, well, some of these, I'm checking off some of these boxes. And I'm like, all right, cool. So sounds like something that, I could consider like doing, and like in 6th grade, like I don't know if I knew enough about myself or the world to be able to say that and project that far forward. But so stuck with that up until I was applying to school. Applied originally as a mechanical engineer, switched schools a couple times, ended up at the University of Maryland, where I switched over to aerospace engineering, and then I've kind of been on this path since then.
Thank you for sharing that. Maya is back with us, so thank you guys for those wonderful responses, and I will let her take it over.
Yes, thank you for jumping in, Caprice. We are engineers, we're scientists, we figured it out, and technology was really rebelling against me. So if that does happen again, just Caprice will take control. But I do apologize for the technical difficulties. But from what I did hear, I'm really excited to hear about what drew each and every one of you to the space. I know that, again, like representation is kind of few and far between in our field. And sometimes we have to do the legwork ourselves to find our role models. And so I want to jump into kind of the next section and maybe jump back just because I like the flow here that we've got going. But who are the top influencers in your life? It doesn't have to be within aerospace, just in your life in general. Don't all unmute at once.
I guess I'll go. I can go. Yeah, so I have, I have a few. Obviously, my family, parents, grandparents, siblings are my biggest cheerleaders, but definitely you have influencers and champions all throughout. From, in high school, I had an AP calculus teacher, Miss Abrams, that maybe you should go to Morehouse and do this engineering thing. By Morehouse, Dr. Willie Rockford, he knew which students were going to go. That's probably why he's produced about 40 Black PhDs in STEM. And at Michigan, Dr. Alec Gallimore, who, gave me a chance and was always willing to listen. At Notre Dame, one of the VPs, Dr. David Moss, who gave me a community, because we all know how lonely grad school can be. So I've been lucky that I've always been able to find men who look like me and who could be honest with me. And I think those would probably be my biggest.
I love hearing those types of stories. Let's go ahead and jump over to Cadence. Who are the top influencers in your life?
Yeah, similarly, I do this thing where I just like seek out mentors and everything that I do. Like if I go to a new place, I immediately am like, okay, who's gonna mentor me? Because like it's necessary. So I've had like several people along the way kind of do this for me. I guess like starting in high school, I'm trying to think, like Dr. Martin, I had one Black teacher ever, and like from my school was tiny and we did K through 12. So I had one. He taught like our equivalent, like high school equivalent of like computer science, so like Excel and like typing really fast and stuff like that. And he approached me one day after I like got accepted into the program that I was telling you all about, and he was like, this is a really big deal. Like not a lot of Black folks like get to do this, and like going to school like in small town Kentucky, like you don't really like, I was the only Black person in my class, so I didn't really have anybody like Black to like talk to about these kinds of things. So like that was like, I guess the initial like ignition to like, oh, like, yeah, okay, I'm Black, I'm like doing stuff. Like just having somebody like that kind of like tell me that at like an early age was really important. But then I've had like, I guess like using the same language, I've had like cheerleaders throughout my career, my academic career, including obviously my parents, my family. They've been incredibly supportive. I'm super grateful for them. But also like an undergrad, the director of the space science program, Dr. Malfaris, he was also just incredible. He actually gave me an opportunity for my first internship experience. It happened to be at MIT's Haystack Observatory. It was really random. I was like going to work one day. He was communicating with another one of my favorite professors, Dr. Panuti, and like Dr. Panuti came up to me and was like, "Hey, do you want to like go work at MIT for the summer?" And I was like, ah! Like it was just like this random opportunity that fell into my lap. So just like having people like that along the way that have just like been there for me and like have had me on their mind, like when opportunities come up in their conversations, have been like the most important thing. That manifests today as like people like my advisor. And then my other mentors here at MIT, like Mary Knapp, who is also at the Haystack Observatory now. So just having people like that in your pocket is been excellent.
That is excellent advice. Like I think cheerleaders, I have all types of names for the people who have supported me along my journey, and that's included cheerleaders, the people who truly advocate for you, that's mentors, the people who really guide you, and like you kind of see the difference in the terms as you find the mentors. For example, Dr. Lyons has been a cheerleader and mentor, as that's the person who will say my name in the room to get me opportunities. And so like those are just very valuable people to identify and find. So thank you for that tidbit, Cadence. What about you, Jean-Louis? Who are your top influencers?
Say my parents first and foremost, kind of watching that grind and watching them make things shake when I didn't know if they were going to be able to make things shake has been inspiring since day one. Starting in high school, I had two teachers in particular that took a very big interest in me, kind of to my annoyance back then, as I just kind of wanted to be in the back of the class, quiet, hanging out, asleep when I could. One of them was Dr. Daniels. He was an English professor, actually, and then the other was Miss Sake, who was my AP biology professor. Dr. Daniels, in particular, I was just thinking about the other day as I kind of opened up the thesis template, and I remember saying to him one time, "Wait, you wrote how many pages for your thesis? That sounds like a lot of work. I'm never going to do that." And then here I am, kind of doing that. Well, while I was at Maryland, I had a few cheerleaders, not a lot of mentors, but people that were always just like, "Hey, so you did really well in this. You've been doing well in this. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about grad school?" In particular, one professor, Dr. Kadu, was like, "Hey, you did really well on this test. It looks like you are good at thermo. Do you want to come work in my lab?" I was just like, "All right, cool, whatever." And he was the one that kind of put that grad school nugget in my brain when I really thought I was just going to kind of get out of Maryland and go and kind of go and get a job. That was reinforced while I was at Maryland, and then landed at Georgia Tech, not really expecting to see a lot of people like me. First day in the lab, met David Hovell, who's been a great friend and a great mentor since day one. Dr. Walker is, of course, Black himself, right? So seeing him day one, Dr. Ruffin here, and like, you know, all these influences in my life, I've kind of been putting in the work to make sure that I feel welcomed, I'm challenged, and I'm supported in ways that that is not always easy to see when those things are happening. But kind of looking back, I can see that doing what they said they've been doing, you know.
Yes, hindsight is definitely 2020, and I can definitely echo those statements as a fellow member of the lab. Hovell, you, Dr. Walker, Ruffin, all have been great resources for us as Black students in AE. And so kind of staying kind of within the, like, talking about influencers and people in our lives who we look up to and kind of pull on for inspiration, I wanted to ask this question. If you're not prepared, that's okay. I'll give you some time to think about it if you need it. But if you could have lunch with any legendary Black aerospace professional, alive or not, who would it be? And you cannot say yourself. We all know you're legendary. Let's start with, well, who's ready for the question? Whoever wants to answer it first can go.
Okay, I cut on my mic. I have to say, if I had the opportunity to meet someone and sit down and have a conversation with them, it would be Betsy Coleman. I would like to go back in time or bring her back to the future or the present time right now and just sit down and talk to her and ask her, you know, about her experiences when she was learning to fly and when she went to France to learn to fly and you know, and how she persevered throughout all the challenges that she had, even when she was in the United States. I mean, I would just love to just talk to her about those first moments of when she actually took flight.
That's beautiful. I love that. I know, you know, Black female pilots is definitely a sight to see. Dr. Pittman, you did mention Ron McNair at one point, and as a McNair scholar, my heart jumped because I love him too, and always inspired by his story. So I not to give you an answer, but I would love to know who you have lunch with.
That would be my answer. One of the things that drew me to Ron Lee McNair's story was that, to me, he was the first time I saw what a non-traditional scientist. He was a Renaissance man of STEM, I would say. He was, you know, cook, martial artist, musician, around the poker table. He was also resilient. I heard the story how he lost all of his PhD data, and within like a week or two, he had to get it all back when he was studying laser optics. So, you know, just to see, you know, especially during that time, going engineering in the 70s and 80s, Black people were starting to go to majority schools for that degree, just understanding that resilience and, you know, what it takes to, you know, astronauts are, in my opinion, the top tier of science, top tier of scientists, top tier of pilots. What's your mindset to get there? That's kind of what I would.
I love that so much because I identify with that. Dr. McNair is definitely one of my lunch persons, but Mae Jemison as well, Dr. Mae Jemison, because what drew me to her was she wasn't just an astronaut. She wasn't just a scientist engineer. She was also a dancer. And I'm very passionate about dance. So it was really cool to kind of connect with her outside of the whole field thing. And, the inspiration with aerospace, the fact that her human side or her hobby side also resonated with me and showed that you can be multifaceted because she was a professional dancer. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I love her. So Cadence, what about you?
Yeah, wow. I actually didn't know that about Maya Jamison. That's wild. I'm not a McNair scholar, but I do work in the McNair building. So that also resonates with me. But I think my lunch person would inevitably have to be Katherine Johnson. I just the way that I learned about her story, especially like on the big screen, like through Hidden Figures, was just absolutely beautiful. I just remember like the impact that film like had on my life. Like after watching that, like sobbing 3 times, obviously through the first like iteration. After watching that, just like I've never felt like more inspired and like more empowered to be in the position that I was in. Like as a Black student doing aerospace engineering, like doing the things that these like women, like the Hidden Figures, like fought for. I would love to sit down and pick her brain and just be like, I mean, I guess just listen to her tell stories because like everything that she goes through, and I'm sure like the way that it was depicted in the film was a very watered down version of like things that actually happened, but like a lot of those same things are still happening today. So just like listening to her tell her story and like learning methods of navigating spaces like this that are still, not inclusive, like I would just love the opportunity to do that.
I totally agree. She's also on my list and she's high up there. Just the breadth of wisdom I just know she could have provided us. And what about you, Jean-Louis?
I was kind of torn on this one. I was half between Katherine Johnson, kind of for the same reasons that Cadence just pointed out there, and then also Arnaldo Mendez, who was an Afro-Cuban. He was actually a cosmonaut, and I learned about him when I was drafting up a mock speech in like a first year speech class about getting NASA some funding. I was looking up, astronauts and specifically Afro-Latin astronauts, and I came upon him and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so this was kind of like early like space race years, from Cuba being a shoe shiner all the way to being a cosmonaut in space. So I'm sure that especially with the stories this guy could tell are definitely something I would love to listen to.
I love that. Yes, I call it rags to riches because that's a Boondocks reference. I'm so sorry, but that's exactly how I see it. You really start from the bottom and to see, people just essentially overcome that on top of the pressures of being Afro-Latino, being Black. I mean, it is absolutely inspiring. So kind of changing gears, I love that we've learned so much about you all and who inspires you. But, those titles that you did all rattle off and the introductions are pretty impressive, and I'm sure that's what people want to learn about too. So I just want to kind of start. I know we talked about, what you do already. So I would love to know, what is a day in the life of your career or what you do? Because I know some of us are students currently. Answer that however you see fit. So let me start with our entrepreneur, Dr. Lyons.
Wow, that's a big question. Day in the life. I tell you what, some days, every day is a different day. I will say this, and every day that I get up and I'm able to say, good morning, is a blessed day. Okay, but day in the life for me is just chaotic sometimes. It really is. It's chaotic. I mean, there's things that I have to do for me, then there's things I have to do as a mom, to start the day, and then there's the business things, and sometimes that can start really early in the morning and it can go all throughout the night, and that's part of being an entrepreneur. Whereas, the buck stops with you, it starts with you, and it stops with you. And so it varies, but it's actually really exciting too. So I start off, a classic day of once I've finished all of my personal and, motherly home chores, I, go into the office and pretty much see how things are going and get the status on all our projects and programs that we're working on. Start looking at critical path, what's critical, and looking at our customers, making sure we've completed all of our deliverables. And, that's pretty much how my day goes throughout the course of the day. And I'm in meetings quite often. Or if something is going on with a particular project that we're working on and it's really exciting, or if there's a problem, then I typically engage. And so I can be in the lab, soldering, doing different things like that. I mean, it just putting rockets together. I mean, you name it. I mean, it just depends on any given day and what's hot. That's a Cliff Notes version of how my day goes.
Imagine rocket scientist, entrepreneur, mom, everything. So, so what about you, Dr. Pittman? What's a day in the life?
Well, it's interesting because since I'm what's called an acquisition professional in the government, we're the ones who have to manage the relationships with. So day in the life usually starts, wake up, come down, check the email, see what fires there are, see pretty much how the day is going to go. There we can have, when the government is on, it's moving, it's almost 24/7. When it's off, it's kind of classic government. But on a busy time, one of the programs we're working on called Armed Overwatch, which is a multi-billion-dollar SOCOM acquisition of aircraft that my team is doing all the engineering for. We'll start off with our team meetings, go through everything that's going there, and then we have to go through our individuals. So look at the broader engineering, talking with the Air Force Engineering Home Office, talking with the SOCOM, talking with some of the testing centers, talking with the flight centers. Once that's done, then you have to move on to the vendors. And you talk with one airplane company, and you talk with another and another. And what we're doing is called airworthiness. So we're just trying to make sure that the plane or the product satisfies the over 800 criteria that the Air Force says that you need for a plane to fly. So, it's a lot of verifying what these companies are saying. When I'm actually visiting these plants, you have to do networking. You have to really be, kind of have to put on the more professional face because you don't want to anger the vendors. Professionality. But, it could be anything from just, looking at spreadsheets, adding documents, observing tests, and, general putting out fires. So, it's almost a roulette, and very exciting for me. And I really enjoy it.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad you highlight that because I think, I know there's kind of a different spread of demographics in our audience between high school, undergrad, graduate, and just, professionals in aerospace. But so many of us are so focused on the technical skills that we forget how important interpersonal skills are and how that's kind of one of the biggest aspects of what we do, despite it being rocket science. And so thank you for highlighting that. I'll jump over to the students because we've got the professional perspective. So let's talk to our graduate students. What's a day in the life for you, John Malie?
A day in the life for me is kind of what I'd say at this point in my PC career feels like chaos. So I get up, I like to get to the lab before everyone gets to the lab just to kind of knock out some of my quiet things. I spend a lot of time reading now and kind of being a little overwhelmed by what I don't know, but we're pushing forward. So people start to get to the lab, and that's kind of when the older grad student kind of has to start coming on. So these days I've been running an experiment for a customer, so I've kind of been troubleshooting that, and things always feel like they are never going to work until they work. So thankfully, that experiment started working recently, so I've been kind of taking data, and that's been coasting along just fine. And then in terms of what I do when I'm not doing that, it's just a lot of trying to be a resource for the younger grad students and the undergrads that are in the lab. I'm in the second half of this PhD thing now, I'd say post-quals and all that, and post-classes. So Now it's like, you know some stuff, you haven't quite earned your PhD yet, but you know some stuff, help some other people do some stuff, teach people some stuff, and then figure out what you got to do to kind of get out the door. So I'm trying to navigate that space, which seems, which I find very hard, but I'm pressing forward. I'm hoping that the light at the end of the tunnel is going to kind of start to shine, hopefully, and then just keep pressing on until I get out of the tunnel, I guess. So that's a date in the life for me.
Awesome. What about you, Cadence?
Yeah, my life's also pretty chaotic. So I guess my day-to-day involves just like both designing, building, and testing spacecraft. So my lab is really broad. We do lots of different things, but mostly it's like all kind of geared towards like the same goal of like launching things. So I get to work on different spacecraft missions that are actually in all different phases. And I do this thing where I like don't know how to say no to things because I think that everything is cool and fun and I want to do all the things, which is not great. So I would recommend definitely like narrowing scope and not doing that. But anyways, so my day it varies drastically given the week. So currently, I guess like the week in context of spacecraft mission. So currently we're gearing up towards a gating review, which is just like a review of like your spacecraft where you currently are. You have to kind of present it to your reviewers, which in our case is NASA. So we're doing lots of different things. So we're in the integration and test phase where we physically have to go to the lab. We're like putting chunks of spacecraft together and testing it and make sure that they're playing nicely and that we don't break things. So that's like really intense and like you have to sink a lot of time into it. My lab is also like the place where we're integrating the spacecraft is like an hour away, so I have to drive an hour there and back every day. So that's kind of chaotic, but again, it kind of varies based on like where the mission is. So I'm working on a few other projects that are kind of in like the beginning design phases. So we're like creating requirements and like doing like requirements review. So that's like a little slower pace. But my day-to-day, unfortunately, I don't have like a really nice, like, oh, I go into the lab at 9 and I leave at 5. Like, I don't have a really cool schedule like that. So my day-to-day, I guess, whenever we're in person is like me stumbling into the lab whenever I can, going into my office. And then the majority of my time is spent in meetings because I am on multiple projects. So I just find chunks of time to work in between meetings and often work a little past dinner. So yeah, I guess that's my day-to-day. I'm also involved in like a bunch of different clubs and stuff because again, I don't know how to say no to things. So I have meetings like for student groups. So I'm like currently one of like the events, co-event chairs for like the Black Graduate Student Association. Then also like different student groups within the department itself and Astro at MIT. So I have all those meetings kind of intertwined as well. So again, just chaos, but yeah.
I love that, and I identified too much, like not knowing how to say no and having your hands in too many baskets. But I'm sure a lot of it's rewarding in the end. So, but I do like this question from the audience. I will save majority of the audience questions for the last 15 minutes of the panel, but I think this is a nice pivot because Mary Kate Smith asks, aerospace engineering is called rocket science for a reason. It's challenging. So what tactics did you use to keep you on the path in the hard times? And all of you kind of discussed kind of the harder parts of what you do. So what grounded you and what kept you going when it got difficult? Let's start with John Louis.
That is a hard question. I kind of like, probably like to my detriment, I kind of just push through things and don't really think about kind of the effect that it's having on my mental health until after I've gotten through that one thing, kind of, or probably just like a defense mechanism I've developed throughout my life. But when things get hard, I try to just like keep my head down and grind my way through it and figure out some way to get through it. Once I've made it out, that's when I kind of, I like to reflect on how exactly I did that because I always impress myself when I do that. And then, try to figure out how to handle that in a better way the next time, but I always just end up doing the same thing. And kind of more recently, it's been easier to get through some of these things because I'm just like, well, dude, you're already in the second half of this thing. There's like, you can't quit now, right? So this "you can't quit now" thing has been a pretty good motivator. But in the first couple of years, I was just like, man, what's going on, whatever. But like I said, just put my head down and grind it.
I really appreciate that transparency, and I love that you bring up mental health, because I think even in the Black community, that's something that is still kind of just a fresh topic for our community, and it's not something that I've noticed that we had prioritized before, and it's becoming more of a priority now. And I'm personally learning that it's so important to this journey. So I'll jump over to Dr. Pittman on the professional side. How do you get through it? How do you get through the tough times?
I got through kind of changed the older I get. Definitely when I was going through it, undergrad and graduate, Brian, you got to get through it. One of the guiding things that kept me going was that if someone before me was able to do it, I should be able to. And that kind of got me through, because a lot of the times, honestly, when Michigan, when I was at Notre Dame, all of us have it. I hit imposter syndrome really hard for a time. Definitely, when I had small successes, I patted myself on the back. My family, they kept me going. They kept me going a lot of the time. I was at Notre Dame, honestly. I was pulling at everything to try and just, because there was no mental health concern while I was care about that back then. And back then, I'm talking about 2011. So, everything from finding things that aren't engineering to do as hobbies, being very active in affinity groups, church, traveling, making sure I had fun, working out. I pretty much tried to find things that distract me. As I got older, I realized that probably, although it got me through the aerospace program, that's not a healthy way to manage things. So definitely looking at, all of the opportunities, all the energy that people have put into me, from my mentors to my family, and thinking, how can I be that person, pull up the next one after? That's what keeps me going.
Absolutely. I'm just going to go ahead and transition to Dr. Lyons.
I have to second Dr. Pittman on that. Just holding that door open and knowing that somebody behind you is going to come forward. I mean, that is priceless. I tell you, that's one of the things that drives me forward, especially during hard times. But then also, too, even before that, I just have to say, I pray. Lord, let no weapon formed against me prosper. I just start praying, because every day is a new day full of challenges, but I also look at it as opportunities as well. And I also tell myself, when I've had situations where I've hit a brick wall or was dealing with difficult people or whatever, or whether it was an engineering problem or dealing with a professor back in the day, I just would say, you know what, tomorrow is going to be a different day. And then next year, on this exact same day, life is going to be different. So I would, try and shift the way that I would think about things. So it's more of a mindset thing. Now, again, I can't say that that's a healthy shift, because sometimes, you're dealing with, a difficult situation, but I would always have to do that. And also too, I worked primarily in a lot of safety critical, life critical environments. So if we were out testing airplanes and doing something and things had to work, I would just have to put myself in a mindset saying, okay, these people are getting ready to go out here and fly and do this work right here. I don't care what else is going on. This is where my priority is. And then I'll go somewhere later and probably behind a bush somewhere and cry, hey, and then I dry my tears up and keep moving forward. So, I just, for the most part, mindset. Change the way you think about difficult situations has been the key to success for me to get through some really tough times.
Absolutely. What about you, Cadence?
Yeah, first and foremost, I really appreciate the conversation that we're having around mental health and tending to your mental health, because again, like Naya mentioned, it's not a conversation that comes up often in the Black community, and we just need to break the stereotype here and just kind of move these things forward. But yeah, I have multiple approaches. The first, like especially when I was going through quals, cardio really helped me a lot because like managing stress levels is something that's really, really hard to do. And so I would like stress run, which again, like probably not the best tactic to, like deal with these things head on, but it helps a lot. I think just like physically moving your body and like taking a break from doing things with your mind is something that is like incredibly important to do and to like integrate into your schedule regularly. But another thing that I really do, I guess two other things that I do. The first, especially when I'm going through incredibly difficult things that are like pertaining to my work, I try to like take a step back and like recenter myself. Because especially like when you're doing math all day, you're getting bogged down in details. Like it's really easy to like let imposter syndrome take over and like convince yourself that you're like not capable of doing anything. But just like taking a step back, like basically reminding yourself who you are as a person, what you've done, and why you're most interested and excited about your field, and just like having that holistic view and reminding yourself that like you are so passionate about what you're doing and that you like deserve to be in these spaces is something that I'm like trying to integrate more into my practice. But I guess the last thing that I do is that I really, really, really lean into my community, my friends, like my groups on campus, like people who don't even like go to MIT. Like I have groups of like pockets of folks around Boston, and I just like really lean into them for support and just for distraction mostly, because it is, like I said, really important to take a break from what you're doing to like clear your mind and then come back and revisit it. And I guarantee it'll be less difficult if you do that.
I think you're absolutely right. And I love how everybody's kind of highlighted something different, because I think in order to get through things, that's going to evolve as you evolve, right? And sometimes you just have to recalibrate. As something that was de-stressing you is now stressing you, recalibrate. Hit the recalibrate button. And I think everybody's experience and way of dealing with it is valid. And so, I think it's exciting to hear, or it's empowering to hear that, the struggle is normal and all of us are enduring it. And so moving on, I know all of us are in graduate school, and we talked about how hard it can be. And we definitely have a number of attendees who are considering graduate school. So I would just like to know what made you do graduate school, because there are different considerations for what you want to do in the professional industry. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts. So what were your main contributing factors to entering and getting a PhD? Let's start with Dr. Pittman.
There were there were two reasons for me at school. The first was I felt that I wasn't prepared as far as technically to enter the workforce. So I wanted to make sure that when I entered in the workforce, I would be technically competent. The second reason is I felt that when I was done with school, I wanted to be done. I never wanted to be back in class again. I just wanted to be done with my education. That's why those are the two main reasons. Of course, then I ended back up teaching for a while, but it was really just trying to come to terms with how prepared that I felt. I did not feel prepared. 2008 was not a great year to come out in the job force, come out in the job market, but those are my two main reasons.
That is a very fair point, and it's really important that we consider that, because you would say the pandemic is not a great time to come out on the job market, and I've heard it more than once that people went into academia because some jobs fell through, and I think that's disheartening, but it's also interesting and a different opportunity and pathway. What about you, Dr. Lyons? You are on the entrepreneurial route, so I'm curious to know how your PhD has affected your work now and why you chose to get one.
Well, my whole path was I wanted to learn more, was my main initial thing. I've always been interested in learning, and I'm just so used to being a student, despite whether being in the military or the corporate world. I've always just loved to learn, and also focus on certain things that I wanted to focus on. Because, as you go from the undergraduate to graduate, your scope starts to get very, very fine. So that was one of my main reasons, but also too to be diversified enough to open up different doors for opportunities. So if I wanted to shift and pivot at any point in time, that I would have the tools necessary to be able to do so. So that was, those have been the real key driving points. And, even down to in the MBA, when I went back to do my MBA, it's like, you know what, I really want to focus a little bit more on the business side of things. And that's been something that's been instrumental along my entrepreneurial journey. My focus was on aerospace and defense within the MBA program. And so that was perfect. I already had the background in terms of the aerospace and defense, and then I just needed that whole business foundation. And so it was, I guess, to answer and to sum it up, it was me getting the extra knowledge that I needed to position myself in different areas so that I would have options. Because I never want to be in a situation where I don't have options, if that makes sense, especially with 9/11, pandemic, and so forth.
Absolutely.
You can't put all your eggs in one basket. So the more you know, I think it's very helpful, and being multidisciplinary too. I have to share this. That has been key to my success. I took jobs that other people didn't necessarily want to do, and I always looked at it as an opportunity to learn. So I'll leave you with that.
That's an awesome piece of advice. Even just being flexible to change career paths, because I've noticed that in your story that it wasn't a straight path. And I think that's awesome because of the experience that you gain along the way. And people shouldn't be afraid of those kind of career paths because they're very enriching too and could end you up in awesome places like you are, Dr. Lyons. So what about our grad students, current ones? So you're not quite at the end of the tunnel. You're still kind of trudging your way through. So this might be a sensitive topic, but kind of tell me why you decided to get a PhD. Let's start with John Blue.
I'd say similarly to Dr. Pittman, I was kind of at the end of my undergrad career, and like I said to people, I dropped the grad school kind of gems in my mind. And so I think I've always envisioned myself in a technical path and kind of technical leadership kind of further down in my careers, or that's kind of what I aspire to and have aspired to since undergrad. And I just figured that getting the PhD would automatically give me the credentials to start to come in and start to build that career when I finished school. And then I was also like, well, if I go and I get a job, I really do not think I'll go back to school. So let me just try to knock this out now, get trained well, kind of get ready to enter the workforce and kind of be ready to solve whatever problems are thrown my way and rise up to whatever challenge pops up.
Definitely. What about you, Cadence?
Yeah, I had similar motivation. So like I mentioned earlier, in undergrad I studied space science, but I knew that I wanted to do more like engineering type of stuff because my major in undergrad was like kind of split. So I took like a bunch of like circuits classes, but then also like high energy astrophysics. So it was like a really weird like conglomeration of things. But I knew that I guess like was previously stated, I didn't feel prepared for industry coming out of undergrad, especially since I knew that I wanted to do more engineering stuff. So that's why I pursued my master's, specific in aerospace engineering, so that I could like get my hands dirty and like physically learn more about spacecraft and how they work in the process. But the reason, I guess I have two reasons why I stuck around for the PhD program. The first is because the real world is difficult. It's difficult to find a job, and honestly, prolonging like entering and just like go ahead and knocking out all the school in one sitting seemed like a better option for me right now. But the second one is because I eventually do want to kind of open up opportunities, especially I know some companies like will only let you be PIs of missions if you have a PhD. So I was like, why don't I just like go ahead and like open up that opportunity for me in the future if that's something that I eventually grow interested in pursuing. So that's one of the reasons why I'm still here. Yeah.
Love that. Absolutely. So options are a big factor, and I would agree the PhD does open a lot of doors. So kind of switching gears to focusing on the next generation and kind of looking at our experiences as Black folks. And it actually corresponds to one of our attendees' questions. But what are the experiences that you've had with diversity and inclusion initiatives in your work environments? And I'd like to just add a little bit of context to that question with the term cultural taxation. It's a term kind of coined by Amaro Padilla, who is a psychology researcher at Stanford. And it just kind of talks about how Black students, Black professionals are often tapped for these diversity inclusion committees and initiatives, and that ends up putting an undue burden on us that our white counterparts and non-Black counterparts don't have. So I'd love to know what your experiences are, if you think they've contributed to burnout, maybe if they've been enriching. I would just love to know how that's been for you. So I will go back with Cadence, because you didn't mention how you have a lot of hats you wear at school. So how has that affected you?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned contributions to burnout, because 100%. Unfortunately, it's been a large contributor for me, especially like, I guess the reason I'm heavily involved, or I guess I was more heavily involved than I am now, but in diversity and equity work at MIT, just because like I said, growing up in Kentucky, like I didn't really have like the opportunity to like speak out, because I was always the only one. And now that I've like entered a community where there's like not a lot of us, but like more than one of us, I feel like more empowered and like in a better position to like use my voice and to actually like, bring change. So like when I first got into grad school, I like dove headfirst into DI&I. DI&I defined as diversity in diversity, innovation.
Equity?
No, it's DI&I. Sorry, it's an MIT definition. Diversity, inclusion, and innovation. Yeah, that's the proper form. Yeah, so my department created this committee and invited me onto the committee, and so I dove headfirst into that work. And it was right around the time that I was also studying for quals, and so like the burnout from being, like in charge of trying to bring about like this really important like opportunity for change that's like 100% necessary for the department, and to like be, like a trailblazer for even like greater initiatives at the institution. Like that was a lot of pressure. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of energy. It was incredibly emotionally taxing, and like it 100% did contribute to burnout. So now I'm doing like a better job of like establishing boundaries and saying no to when people ask me to join committees, because I'm like, I need to graduate. Like, just like very much like communicating that like 100% I will sign on, but like please don't ask me to lead things, because grad students, especially like Black graduate students, often get asked to lead things with no compensation. And so that like sinking a bunch of time there, even though it's like something that's really important and it's obviously something that we all really care about, but you have to be cognizant of the fact that that's taking energy away from your research, and that's the reason why you're in grad school. So balance is important. Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Sorry, I live in Atlanta, loud sirens. But you definitely hit the nail on the head with the burnout, and also the lack of compensation. That's time and investment and treasure that we volunteer. And it's expected of us, and it's really not always fair. So I would love to hear on the professional aspect, jumping over to Dr. Pittman, how has that affected your career and your journey?
Very similar in grad school at Notre Dame. Definitely was tasked with some of their recruitment efforts. Whether it was bringing some students from Morehouse up to actually going and doing the job of the recruiter for the university. Luckily, about a fourth of the time I was compensated. There was that. Chicago State was interesting. It's a predominantly Black institution, so, the inclusion efforts are a little bit different. You're not looking to increase the population, but you're trying to make sure that they get through graduation. And honestly, at my new role at the Air Force, because I wanted to give myself some time with that, I haven't jumped in head first to that. Because it's important, especially once you get into the professional career, you see there's not a lot of you. There's not too many times you can make mistakes. So you see a lot of your counterparts, even though you see a lot of your some of the contractors who making double, triple that you have to work out. You have to be very careful about the mistakes you make, because you only get so many. So, but I plan to get involved in the Air Force's diversity and inclusion. Air Force, like the DOD, like the federal government, there are honestly just not enough engineers, period, and there are not enough Black engineers across the board. So it's definitely one of our responsibilities. When you get your PhD, it says the rights, privileges, and responsibilities. Definitely one of our responsibilities to make sure that there is somebody who comes after me. You should always try to make sure you are not the last in a healthy environment.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And it's so interesting, as a student trying to find that boundary. Like, yes, it's your responsibility, but at what point am I sacrificing my own journey? Because I have undue stress and pressure on me to open all the doors, But I'm loving the different perspectives. So let's jump over to John Lee.
I agree with what Cadence was saying in terms of definitely contributing to burnout, and then absolutely being very emotionally taxing. I kind of stepped back on my D&I kind of like role here at the school since I was studying for quals. I remember I had a student mentee from the Engages program here at Georgia Tech. At the time, I was also supposed to be doing experiments and also studying for quals and also helping some of the younger grad students do things. And I remember it being an incredibly an incredibly emotionally taxing time in my graduate student career. And I think kind of just my personal style when it comes to engaging with younger minority students, whether they be younger grad students or undergrads and even high school students, is that I understand that our race and what goes on outside of the walls of whatever facility we're at plays into the way that they navigate these spaces. And so like Dr. Pittman said, you only have so many mistakes to make when you're in such when you're in such a role, especially for younger undergrads and high school students, that they themselves are navigating life in whatever way they see fit and they can, and it's hard to kind of take that emotional toll onto yourself while also doing what you got to do to kind of get out of here, right? Because it's one thing to give back and continue to give back, but you cannot continue to give back if you don't get out, right? And then I definitely feel that there's a lot of pressure to be a leader when you're a Black student at these institutions. You kind of come in and you are automatically expected to be a leader and automatically expected to take on that role, which it lines up well with, I think, my personality and kind of the career that I want for myself, to be a leader and to exercise those muscles and to learn how to do that. But it's incredibly frustrating to watch your counterparts not have any of that pressure and kind of just coast in, do kind of the bare minimum in these spaces, and then kind of make their way out, and right? So that's a lot.
No, that's great. You hit a lot of different important points, and I hope all of the, the Black students and professionals hearing this take that into consideration, that your journey matters too, and there are different ways to contribute to the next generation. And also, it's not our responsibility to fix racism. If that were the case, it would be fixed. And so these organizations have to take a bigger role instead of just putting it, all the burden on students. And so, Dr. Lyons, you are so involved in so many different ways in your professional life and in your personal life with the next generation. I'd love to know what your experiences have been.
Well, I've had a rich diversity of experiences, I'll say. But one thing that, I'll really have to say is that when you just have to know when to say no. When it comes down to your health, your own mental health, and when you hit that breaking point, you have to say no. You have to take a pause. And you mentioned it earlier, you have to know when to, recalibrate and so forth. That to me has been one of the biggest things, but also with that, tapping into your network is critical too. when things get rough, especially in grad school and so forth, you have to have someone or a network of people to at least tap into that can kind of understand and relate and give you knowledge and guidance and some nuggets, nuggets of wisdom to carry you through those moments, because yes, there's pressure, to represent and to do all sorts of different things, that you'll have placed to, and you'll see your peers, and your peers won't have any of that placed on them. I'll go back to mindset. With me personally, I've just, know what you want to call it, but I've become a master at really channeling my mindset to focus on whatever it is, the mission. So if you've got to get out of school, you've got to get out of school. I mean, at the end of the day, complete whatever it is that you need to get done. When you have time, give back, but don't run yourself in the ground. And in terms of compensation, you have to, if closed mouths don't get fed. So if you don't ask, then you probably will get used, especially in the academic environment sometimes when it's like, oh, we want you to do this, or you're a student, do that. Well, I mean, you're students, but you're also humans, and you're also building skills and knowledge, which is value. So you have something to bring to the table. So you really have to speak up and also do a self-check and recognize and remind yourself that you have value. And so if you don't ask and if you don't advocate for yourself in those ways, then oftentimes you'll find yourself caught up that way. But yes, we do, have an obligation to, help other people see us so that they will feel inspired when they are having a hard, difficult day or hard times. Sometimes all it takes is for them to look up and they'll see you or anyone that looks like them. And if they can identify with others, sometimes that's all it takes. So you might not have to be out in the forefront actively doing things, but sometimes if you just step out and let yourself be seen, then that can make a difference sometimes. So hopefully I answered your question, but it's a lot because it's different, in my corporate experience has been very different, working for a major corporation where they have affinity groups and they have diversity councils and they have a strong, I've worked with strong networks of organizations, which I found that they were extremely value added. And I absolutely love them, like Juneteenth. A lot of people are just now learning about Juneteenth. Well, when I came to the Boeing company, that's when I learned about Juneteenth because we celebrated it every year. And so that's where, I initially learned about the celebratory and the deep historical portion of that. So I will say that, depending on where you in school or starting your career, in school, you do have to focus on your academics, right, and get out of school. But then when you get into the corporate world, those types of organizations and groups, they are very much valuable, and they can certainly help you and nurture you, and you'll find a network from there to be able to get through. And then you will have time too, because you'll be getting compensated because you're working, and then you can really have that time to give back and pay it forward. So hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that summarizes that point so perfectly. And we are running toward the end of the panel, and I apologize, attendees, I couldn't get all your questions in, but know that the conversation doesn't have to end here. Black and Astro Week is this whole week, so if you want to direct any questions on Twitter, or we will get them to the panelists and hopefully connect them. At this time, I would love to welcome our founder, Ashley Lindalia, to come and share some words and thank the panelists and attendees for attending today.
Thank you so much, Naya. I've been here the whole time. Sorry if my camera is off for whatever reason. Blue Jeans is like, we don't like your camera, so you can't have one. So thank you all so very much for participating and being here and sharing your experiences on behalf of Black and Astro. I founded Black and Astro last year because of everything that was going on in the world. And I'm actually a former student of Dr. Pittman's. So he knows all about my activism work up and down Chicago State University. And so I, wanted to continue spreading the love within the space sciences whether it's aerospace engineering, doing Afrofuturism, which is, by the way, tomorrow, which is Black to the Future. So you'll all see some cool things and enter in the art competition because we got some cool prizes. And everything that's going on through the rest of this week, which is dedicated to Black and Astro, whether you're doing space policy, whether you're an astrophysicist or an astrochemist like me, whether you do space photography. We want to show that this is our community and this is who we are as Black people. So once again, I want to thank all of you all for participating in this event, and I'll hand it back over to Naya.
I think that wraps everything up so perfectly. I'll just throw in some extra words to fill the time. But thank you again, panelists. It was so it's incredible to not only see what you do, and I've seen and read up on all of you, and what you do is just amazing. But to also just kind of hear about you as a person is really exciting. And thank you for allowing us to peek behind the curtain. And thank you for spending an hour and a half with us to, just like we said, bring up the next generation, support the next generation, inspire the next generation. And that is an investment that I understand how much it does take from you, but I know how rewarding it can be. And so we're really grateful to have you. Attendees, thank you for coming on. Again, I've got your questions. Keep them in your back pocket. This entire week is Black and Astro Week. It ends on Saturday. And so engage with us on Twitter at Black and Astro, Instagram at Black and Astro _. And then you can also follow along with our schedule on blackandastro.com. And so you see how you can jump in and interact with everybody this week. So again, I'm excited. Thank you everybody for your participation and your patience with all my technical difficulties. But I'd love to wrap up the panel and just say goodnight. And thank you again for coming.